Every moment that we are talking about banning cell phones, we are not talking about regulating social media.
When we're using our phone, we're just using it as like this method to not actually deal with the anxiety, learn how to manage it.
What's not appropriate is that the only skill that we're teaching kids to prepare them for their future digital world is how to put their phone in a device that locks it every day.
This is Top of Mind. I'm Julie Rose, and today we are tackling the debate over phone bans in schools. As always, the goal here is to find some nuance with a range of perspectives and come away with the ability to be better citizens, kinder neighbors, and more effective advocates. I'm glad you're here. In just the last 2 years, half of states have adopted laws that ban or regulate cell phone use in schools. And when I saw how controversial these bills were, I was pretty stumped. Why do kids need cell phones at school? We all know they're a huge distraction. And if a parent needs to reach their kid during the school day, they can just call the front office, like my parents, and yours probably did. School without cell phones worked great for entire generations. So what is the fuss? Well, then I mentioned this to two of my sisters. Both have kids in high school, and I was genuinely surprised at how emotional their response was. They absolutely need their teens to have access to their phones during the school day for emergencies and also to coordinate pickups and after-school activities. Now, they both said they would be fine if their kids were required to put their phones away during class time, but they did not want phones entirely banned from school property or locked up at the front office all day, which is the approach some schools have taken. Why is this such a heated debate? And where is the common ground? Let's find out.
I don't want them to take my phone.
This is Anna Clayton. She's heading into her senior year in high school, and she's had a smartphone since 7th grade.
It's hard to balance it because sometimes it's like you feel more lonely if you're like just scrolling on Instagram, but if you're using it for productive reasons, it can be super beneficial and fun to connect with others.
Anna is on a student advisory council for the Utah State School Board. They review proposed legislation that affects schools. And so when the Utah legislature started debating a bill to ban cell phones in schools in early 2025, Anna was asked to consider it. And she was initially opposed, but she felt she needed to give it a close look.
So I ran a 2-week experiment. I deleted all social media. I left my phone in my car from 7:25 to 2:10. And I was like, I'm just going to go all in and try this. And I just took notes every day of like little things I would notice or wanting my phone or how it was affecting me. And from the first day, my screen time dropped from 6.5 hours to 2.5 hours. So immediately it was like this whole dramatic change, and it was crazy. Not only during class time was I like, oh, I guess I'll work on my homework because I don't have my phone with me. But also I had kind of been using it as a shield during like walking in the hallway. You don't want to see someone, or like you're just like, oh, I'll just go on my phone while I'm like doing this, and just kind of blocking myself from unwanted eye contact and stuff like that. I kind of found myself wishing other students were running the same experiment, because there I was, open for conversation at the end of class, because I didn't have my phone and everyone else was just on their phone. And I was like, I wonder what it would be like if we were all trying this collectively.
So after those 2 weeks, Anna was convinced. And then she wrote an opinion piece in the statewide newspaper supporting the phone ban.
I was kind of nervous to put out my article because I was like, okay, people aren't going to really like this. Like, even yesterday, someone asked me, I told them I'm going to be talking about this. And they're like, so how do you feel? And I'm like, I just don't think phones should be in schools. I think it's so distracting. And they're like, really? Like, I don't think you should say that. And I was like, I know. So it is hard because we like our phones, you know, we love them. They're fun. They're a dopamine hit. We don't want it to be taken away from us. And so I was shy about it a little more. This won't work in schools if the students aren't involved and don't feel like they're a part of the decision and they're the ones like making it work.
Anna Clayton is a rising senior at a public high school in Utah. Her viewpoint appeared in the Salt Lake Tribune with the title, "I want my fellow young Utahns to feel the peace I discovered without my smartphone." The sponsor of the bill to ban smartphones in Utah public schools was Republican State Representative Doug Welton. He is a longtime high school teacher, and he has seen the distraction that phones pose to the students in his Japanese and debate classes. But when this issue first came up in the Utah legislature in 2023, Welton was actually opposed to banning phones in school.
The opposition was putting all the pressure and all the onus on the teachers and the classroom teachers to do all the dirty work to keep cell phones out. It seemed kind of like an overreach for the legislature to jump in.
Well, what changed then for you 2 years later that you were willing to sponsor a bill?
Well, probably reading Anxious Generation was probably the biggest factor.
The Anxious Generation is a book that came out in 2024 by noted social psychologist Jonathan Haidt. If your state legislature or school district is debating phone bans, I can almost guarantee it's because somebody in that room has read The Anxious Generation. Haidt argues the increased rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide that we're seeing in young people are a direct result of too much time spent on phones and not enough real-world play. Now, critics say Haidt's claims are too broad and simplistic. But for Utah lawmaker Doug Welton, they connected some dots to what he'd been seeing in students at his school.
You go into the cafeteria and you see kids who used to talk and who used to be noisy, and they're just sitting around looking at their phones. And sometimes they'll say something, but they're not engaging and they're not building that social resiliency. And they really struggle when they're asked to do hard things, when they're asked to talk to people.
So the next time the Utah legislature met in early 2025, Welton wasn't just on board with restricting phones in schools. He was the main House sponsor of a statewide all-day ban from first bell to the last, which is the intervention Jonathan Haidt recommends. But
we immediately started getting pushback from parents, from members of leadership that felt like it was too far, and they were getting a lot of pressure from certain parent groups. So the policy that passed says that there's no cell phone use during instructional time.
Now, it wasn't the bell-to-bell ban, but it was at least something, says Welton. And schools do have the option to implement stricter policies if they want, which Utah State Representative Doug Welton hopes they will. So let's hear from some parents next. We've got two of the leading voices weighing in for and against banning phones in schools.
To really be effective, the phones have to be inaccessible to students during the school day. They've never really had the opportunity collectively to be off their phones and experience life that's not completely online.
You can ban cell phones during the day in a school, but the majority of TikTok challenges, the majority of bullying, happen after 2:30 in the afternoon. And so we are not really solving the issue.
How and why parents feel so strongly about phones is next. I'm Julie Rose, and this is Top of Mind from the BYU Radio Podcast Network. Hey, Top of Mind listeners, I have another podcast I want to recommend to you. It's from the BYU Radio family of podcasts, and it's called The Appleseed. It's a show filled with stories for you and your family. Each episode features master storytellers sharing all kinds of stories, folk tales, fairy tales, personal and family tales. So it's perfect for road trips, for bedtime, or really anytime you're looking for something that the whole family can enjoy together. And the stories you'll hear will likely get your family sharing their own stories with each other, which is really the best part. It's the payoff. So listen to The Appleseed wherever you get your podcasts. So it's not like schools have been completely asleep at the wheel on this issue. Every school has some kind of cell phone policy. It's just that enforcement has been all over the map. Lots of schools leave it up to teachers to decide how to handle phones. So some will have cubbies for students to store their mobiles during class. Others will simply ignore phones unless they become a huge disruption. As the push for stricter policies has gained momentum, it's become common for schools to have students put their phones in a centralized locker at the main office or in a magnetic pouch at the start of the day and then retrieve it at the final bell. The leading parents group pushing to keep smartphones out of schools all day long is led by Sabina Polak.
I am the mom of 3 and co-founder of the Phone Free Schools movement.
She organized it with another parent before Jonathan Haidt's book even came out. Polak actually started working on this issue in 2021 because of what was happening in her family.
Our oldest daughter, she was just starting ninth grade. As far as we knew, she was a happy, thriving, ambitious young lady, no red flags that we were aware of until basically one day she just wasn't. We got a call from the school counselor saying that she was feeling suicidal and that we needed to take her to be evaluated right away. Of course, we were floored, and we later found out that it was, things that were really being fueled by her social media and smartphone use. It was being able to see everyone's life and not being, if you weren't part of it or weren't invited or didn't get the likes. And she actually asked to be put in a mental institution because it was the only way that she felt that she could get away from her phone, like forcibly, like in a confined place almost.
Polak's daughter spent 6 weeks in treatment, and she was doing much better without a smartphone or access to social media. But then she went back to school,
where smartphones were very prevalent and there was no restriction. There was on paper, but there was no enforcement of it. And she just, I remember the one day her just crying and just saying, like, it's miserable. I'm the only one without a phone. I can't communicate to my friends. No one talks to me. It was almost like this, such like a secondhand smoke effect. So it kind of gave me this insight into just that it wasn't this individual problem.
Polak says school officials agreed with her that a stricter phone policy would be helpful, but
it was always about, listen, we have to have a whole lot of parent support to be like willing to do this. And we're just not going to get that.
So Polak co-founded the Phone Free Schools movement to step up pressure on schools nationwide. And then Jonathan Haidt's book hit the bestseller list.
The Anxious Generation was kind of this tipping point. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be game changing.
We hoped to speak with Jonathan Haidt for this episode, but he was unavailable to do an interview. He now sits on the board of Polak's Phone Free Schools movement, and thanks in part to their advocacy, nearly a third of U.S. public schools now prohibit cell phones in class and during lunch, during passing periods, and extracurriculars. As Polak's group has worked with schools to implement those policies, she says they have learned that it's not enough to just ask kids to keep their phones out of sight.
For the policy to really be effective, the phones have to be inaccessible to students during the school day. So if it's a bell-to-bell policy, but the students are storing them in their backpack, we have found that just creates different challenges.
Like how? As long as it's not being seen, why would that still be a problem?
Just knowing it's there and could be accessible is a distraction. Kids are inevitably going to try to sneak, like super easy to sneak your phone. They're always going to try to do that. It puts the burden on the teachers. It ends up not being enforced.
If parents need to reach their kid or vice versa, Polak says that communication can happen through the main office. In fact, she thinks it's counterproductive for kids to be able to text or call a parent on a cell phone at any moment during the day.
I think it just makes these students like way more reliant on their parents and not able to kind of gain the independence that school has traditionally been like a facilitator of, because they are in this safe environment where they are kind of are able to experience things through trial and error and gain that independence and gain that resilience. And I think like when we're relying too much on our parents to be able to fix every problem, even while we're in school, we're stripping away like an important potential for learning there and growth.
Yeah. It's kind of funny, though, Sabina, because you're arguing we need to help our kids be resilient, learn how to function in the world. And one of the arguments is, well, shouldn't we also be doing the very same thing with social media and with phones? Like, taking it away from them isn't going to help them be more effective when they do have their phones in their hands. So could the schools play a role in helping students learn to have restraint and not pull the phone out of their bag during class and to be able to use it in a safer, more productive way?
I would kind of argue against that. Digital literacy is definitely like an important piece of the equation, but I think the more important piece of the equation is giving these kids the space to develop the basic skills that they need. Like if they don't have the basic social skills, emotional skills, they're not able to build resilience, they're not going to be able to manage these devices no matter how much we try to teach them how to use them. And I think the quickest way that we can really make an impact is to remove the phones from schools.
Sabina Pollack is co-founder of the Phone Free Schools movement. Her counterpoint on this issue is Carrie Rodriguez.
I'm Matthew, Miles, and David's mom and the president of the National Parents Union.
It's another nonprofit coalition of parents that works on a variety of issues, and they've staked out a position against banning phones in schools. Rodriguez says her initial position on this was actually pretty different when she first heard Jonathan Haidt's arguments.
I had heard Jonathan on a stage talking about, his new book and the research, and I wanted to hop on a plane, get back, and just rip those phones out of the hands of my children because, it just seemed so clear that social media was absolutely devastating them from an emotional, psychological perspective. I was very compelled by the data. So I brought this back to our family advisory council and was immediately just shocked with the back. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. The things that were so critical to them is that, this issue of safety and the fact that we as a country love guns more than we love children. There is no way that we are ready at this point to yield that very critical communications device that keeps us connected to our children in this moment.
What is the scenario then that these parents are saying, I need my kid to have their cell phone on during class?
Uvalde, Parkland. There are people who I have heard quite often in this argument saying, well, a cell phone could go off and could tip off a shooter. I have not heard one of them be able to give us a single instance of where that has happened. However, I can tell you of specific instances, Parkland, Uvalde, where cell phones and children having access to them and being able to call parents and families, to be able to call first responders to help and assist, has saved lives. I've also heard Jonathan Haidt say that, I don't understand why parents want to get a hold of their kids and need to have cell phones to do it. If you want to get a hold of your kid, just call the school secretary.
It's what they did when I was growing up, right? When you were in school.
And it was when you and I were in school, it was also before Columbine, where we had mass shootings. That was 25 years ago. And I don't know if Jonathan Haidt and his kids attend a high school like mine, where there were 3,000 kids in the building. But if somebody goes in that building and shoots it up, you want the parents of 3,000 children calling a school secretary? Have you ever tried to call a school secretary to find a student in a building with 3,000 kids? That may work if you have a kid who is attending, a school that's got 200 kids, maybe. But for the rest of us that don't live in that place of privilege, that have, folks that are growing up in families with single moms, where mom is working after school, where kids have to take the bus to go home, the world that we live in, where if you want to go to an extracurricular and you've got to navigate that, or you've got to go pick up your younger siblings, it's necessary.
And Rodriguez says parents see phones as a crucial support for children with disabilities or emotional support needs.
I will tell you that I am the mother of a child who has a 504. My first husband passed away from cancer. Part of my youngest child's grief process is dealing with anxiety and depression. He cannot deal with any kind of he's kind of a neat freak, a little OCD. Everything must go perfectly, or he just is off the walls. He had a teacher who was chronically absent last year and was not getting the support through his 504. So he would be panicked. He was going down to the nurse's office and calling me, come get me, come get me, come get me. What he learned to do was take his cell phone, and when his substitute wasn't able to help him, he went into the bathroom and hopped on FaceTime, and we'd do our breathing exercises and de-escalate. So I'm not that unique. There are a whole host of reasons why special education students utilize cell phones, and they are very angry about the blanket bans that are having here.
And all this focus on banning phones, adds Rodriguez, misses the real threat to kids:
It is quite clear that social media is having a detrimental impact on our children. However, parents, frankly, have been very frustrated because every moment that we are talking about banning cell phones, we are not talking about regulating social media. And you can ban cell phones during the day in a school, but the majority of TikTok challenges, the majority of bullying, the majority of instances that are leading to these depressive situations, all of this happen after 2:30 in the afternoon. And so we are not really solving the issue.
Rodriguez and the National Parents Union want social media companies held accountable for harm to children on their platforms. The bipartisan Kids Online Safety Act of 2023 took a stab at that, but stalled in the face of opposition from the tech industry.
I have learned as a parent in politics, you got to hit them in the pocket. They've got to be afraid of losing money because we love money more than kids, and they will sacrifice our kids to continue making money in this way.
Meantime, Rodriguez says schools should be using technological solutions that are already available to manage disruptive phone and social media use while in school without turning to blanket bans.
I think there are different levels for different kids. We're not saying our kids should have phones interrupting at any point. And if we want to call a kid or they want to call us, it should be interrupting a lesson. Absolutely not. Many of us utilize software like Bark and Aura in our own homes, cell phone management software, so that we can regulate what apps are used within our own homes and shut off Wi-Fi and limit access to different websites and all of these things, even text messaging, who they text message. There is no reason why we couldn't utilize cell phone management software so that we were lessening the impact of these devices while we teach kids how to moderate. And I will say one other thing. I have never seen a teacher who has excellent classroom management skills have difficulty with cell phones in a classroom and having it be so disruptive that they cannot conduct a class. And that would lead me to what I think is the real problem, because these cell phone bans, we are really teetering around the edges of what the real problem is. Cell phone addiction and all of this that we are seeing, this distraction, it's a symptom of a greater disease. And that is the disengagement crisis we have with kids, because we have dead classrooms in this country where our kids are so desperate to engage. They are latching onto the thing that captivates their imagination, that engages them, that gets them excited, which is what's happening on a cell phone, because what's happening in the classroom is not engaging them.
Carrie Rodriguez is president of the National Parents Union. So just how engaging does a teacher have to be to compete with the smartphone?
Yes, school is supposed to be interesting, but teachers just cannot be dancing and yelling and spinning up around a room all the time when we're trying to give our kids information.
A teacher who has worked in a school with a strict phone ban and one without offers her take next on Top of Mind from the BYU Radio Podcast Network. I'm Julie Rose. We'll be right back to today's episode of Top of Mind. But first, are you ready to immerse yourself in the awe-inspiring world of nature? Then I recommend you listen to Constant Wonder. It's another great show from the BYU Radio family of podcasts. Join host Marcus Smith in riveting conversations with individuals whose lives have been touched by Earth's beauty and mysteries. Uncover captivating stories that shed light on our planet's wonders, from history to science and beyond. If you crave enriching experiences and a deeper connection with the world around you, tune in to Constant Wonder. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Currently, we're reading Hunger Games.
Nina teaches 9th grade English.
I think we all can agree that Hunger Games is a popular young adult book. But actually, the biggest reaction I've gotten from my kids is, we're going to read a book. Can we just watch the movie? And I think, if I can't capture their attention with an exciting, fun book, how can I capture their attention? Because I'm trying, but also I'm an English teacher. So we do have to read material at a very basic level. That's something we have to do in this class.
We are not using Nina's last name because she didn't get permission from her school to talk with us. She's a pretty new teacher. She started in 2023 at a high school in Arizona, where at the time, teachers had to figure out their own cell phone policies.
What that means is there's another task on my plate. So if you add phones into the mix, you now have another behavior to manage while you're trying to teach them something, which is really difficult because, in my opinion, kids are attached to their phones. It's like, if you have a little kid that has like a pacifier and you rip it out of their mouth, they're going to cry. And if you have a kid and you rip their phone away from them, they get upset. So often it becomes this thing where now you have kids who weren't even on their phones, who are distracted by the kids that were on their phone. And so for me as a teacher, it means less time teaching.
Which is why Nina felt relieved when she relocated to Florida, which happens to be the first state to have passed a law regulating phone use in school. Phones are prohibited during class time in all Florida public schools. And Nina's school requires them to be out of sight all day long.
It's nice here in Florida. I don't really have to figure out what's best for me in my classroom because the phones are already kind of, I wouldn't say fully out of the picture because kids are kids, right? But at least I can say, well, actually, that's against the law. So
Nina's view on this is not unusual. The National Education Association says 90% of its members support banning phones in schools. Teachers much prefer the policies be uniformly enforced at the school level.
And of course, you're going to see kids, they'll go to the bathroom, they'll pull it out in the hall, and an administrator sees them and they take it. And kids are kids. They're going to do things like that. They're going to try to push boundaries and rules. Every teenager, I think, does that. But I just think that in general, it's less of an issue.
Do you do active shooter drills?
We do,
at your school? What do you think about the lack of kids having phones in a scenario like that? If there were a school shooting, parents express a lot of concern about that. Like, I need to be able to reach my kid.
That is a really, really difficult situation and something I understand because it's scary. As a teacher, it's scary. During the drills that we do, the biggest problem I have is I've got you turn off the lights, it's supposed to be dark, all the phones light up. Even here where phones are banned, as soon as the lights go off, the phones come out. Okay, does a kid's phone go off and it's now alerting somebody to where we're sitting? Or are they trying to talk on the phone to the parent and they're being loud, or lights are flashing and now we've got someone coming at us? So that, for me, is a concern. But I also understand you're in a scary situation and you want to text your mom.
Do you have parents who talk to you about, they're in Florida, who are like, come on, I need to be in touch with my kid?
I think in general, parents understand, especially here. It's hard to ask somebody to be flexible on the law. Like, how do you say, oh, but can you just break the law for my kid? I will say maybe a more unique situation that I dealt with in Arizona. I had a lot of kids with a lot of difficult things happening at home in life. I worked at a Title I school, so a lot of kids in Arizona below the poverty line, things like that. I had one kid, I remember, he's like, Miss, please, I'm texting my mom. The car broke down, the tire, I'm trying to help her figure out how to do this. And I think that's really hard. And I understand why kids want to talk to their parents. But I also think that education is the most important thing that a student can be doing in that time. There's always going to be something that needs fixed or needs their attention. A lot of those kids were working and helping pay bills and things like that. But when you're at school, this is your opportunity to raise your situation. And I don't think having their phone there to tune them back into a situation that's difficult is actually really helpful in the long run.
Thanks to high school English teacher Nina for that perspective from inside the classroom. Okay, so I'm curious how you are feeling at this point, because I am feeling pretty torn here. Clearly, phones can be distracting, and social media can be harmful to young people. Also, kids and parents have structured their lives around the ability to communicate as needed, and I get how disruptive it can be to take that away. Well, our last guest thinks the reason we are so divided about this is because we're thinking about the problem wrong.
The problem is that many school policies start with a whole list of don'ts, but they never articulate what are the do's, what are the actions that we want students to practice using when it comes to technology.
Richard Collada is CEO of the International Society for Technology and Education. It's a nonprofit that works with schools to implement technology policies. He's also the author of a book called Digital for Good, Raising Kids to Thrive in an Online World. So what exactly does an effective cell phone policy with a positive spin entail? Well, I asked Collada to be specific.
So give me 1 second. This is an example, and it's important to note, it is not the same norms, I like calling it norms as opposed to policies, for earlier age kids than from later high school kids. So this is one that would be for, maybe middle school students, right? And it has 4 parts. How should I use the technology? I will use my device when a teacher asks me to during class or on my own study time or during breaks, right? I will put my devices away when the teacher tells me it's time for a device break. What do I do when something goes wrong? When I do something that is not in line with this agreement, I will talk to a teacher or a trusted adult to help me figure out how to make it right. I will immediately stop and tell a trusted adult if anything happens on the computer that doesn't feel right or makes me feel uncomfortable, right? Notice these are all framed in a positive way. None of them say don'ts, right? But inherently by saying what you want to do, you are also saying what not to do. But it's just a much better way to pitch this to kids.
And Collada says an effective policy may include the option of a short-term ban on devices.
So, for example, if I were a school leader and there had been no healthy norms that were set up, no good conversations about when and where and how the technology use was appropriate, and it was just out of control, I would absolutely say we are hitting a pause and there are no devices that are going to be here. It is just total pause in the backpack, stay at home for a week or two while we take a minute and have some conversations that we should have had a long time ago. And we're going to talk about what these norms look like and what happens when you're using technology in ways that doesn't show this balance that we want to see, this healthy use of technology. That would be totally appropriate. But what's not appropriate is that the only skill that we're teaching kids to prepare them for their future digital world is how to put their phone in a device that locks it every day.
And so in that positive approach that you described, what happens when a kid does not abide by the norms?
What you do is, in that case, you say, hey, and this is important, you remind them of the norms that they agreed to, right? You said, hey, we had an agreement. Is the way that you are currently using your device in line with that agreement? And if the answer is, yeah, probably not, then you say, okay, we all make mistakes, giving you a heads up. Can you try to make sure you're aligned with that? Great. Now let's say that same kid happens again the next day. Then I start to have a slightly different conversation. I say, hey, it looks like you may not be ready to have this agreement, to be part of this agreement. You're not showing the level of responsibility or maturity that we need to. So we're going to take a break, right? Nobody's getting, in trouble. We're just taking a break in order to have some time to reset.
Meaning I confiscate the phone?
I don't know that I need to confiscate the phone. We trust kids. Where is that? Kids are good kids, right? So we say, let's, phone needs to go away. It's gone for the rest of the class and next class too. We're going to just take a little break and let's try one more time, right? This is what we do. We teach good behavior. Mm-hmm. And I recommend that families do this too. You should have a written agreement of what are our family norms when it comes to using technology. We want kids to understand that there's a balance and that there are meaningful applications for using technology to support their learning.
Right. But also it is very hard to maintain a balance because there, for all of us, right?
Sure.
So how do we teach young people and ourselves? What does balance look like?
It is the number one question that I got. And if you only remember one thing from what I say, is the idea of screen time is actually not a very helpful concept. What we want to think about is screen value. And there's so much research that supports this. And so if you have a kid who is using, or an adult, by the way, this applies to us too, let's be clear, that is using a device for something very creative, for designing, for building, for problem solving, for reading, those are activities that are very appropriate for an extended amount of time. If a kid is using a game, maybe a sort of a mindless game that's just not adding any value, very little amount of time makes sense because it doesn't add value. And context matters too. So if it's a beautiful sunny day and my kid is playing a game that's fairly repetitive and not very meaningful, instead of going outside and getting exercise and playing with their friends or doing another digital activity, That's different than when I'm in a 12-hour car ride and we've sung every song that I can think of. And it's like, you know what, just play the game for a little while. Obviously, this wouldn't be as appropriate if we were at home and you had other important activities to do, right? That's the sort of thing that you say overtly. The wrong way to do this is to say, you've been playing that game for so long, your brain's turning to mush, you better turn off that phone. And I've literally had kids say, okay, what would you like me to do? And the parent goes, I don't know, I don't care, just not that, right? That is not helpful, right? A far better thing would be to say, hey, I see that you're playing a game. It's probably a fine game if we've chosen to let you have it on your phone. My problem is that I think we're a little out of balance. I notice you haven't had any exercise today. I notice you haven't checked in with your brothers and sisters at all today. And I think you might have some homework that's due tomorrow. And so it's not that I am saying don't play the game. I'm saying there are other things that you need to be using your valuable time on instead of that now.
And what about the big debate over when it's appropriate to even give a kid a smartphone? Well, Jonathan Haidt has made headlines for advocating that kids shouldn't get a smartphone before high school, and he says they should stay off social media until they're 16. But here again, Collada calls for nuance.
I think we have this very binary way of thinking about devices. We say, I'm going to wait until X years old, and then my kid's going to have a phone, and now they just have access to everything, right? Mm-hmm. That is a horrible and dangerous way to think about giving kids access to technology. We would never do that with anything else. Imagine a car being like, well, you've never driven before, you're 15, here's a key to Ferrari, good luck, right? No. We would say, hey, you're going to drive with me. We're going to practice some things with me as the driver, and you're going to observe some things. Then we're going to say, now you have a permit, and you're going to drive a slow car. And then you practice. You gradually, the word that we use in education is scaffolding, right? We provide scaffolding, and then we slowly remove the scaffolding. That is the same way we should think about device access. With the first phones that we give our kids, they have no data plan. They only have a handful of apps, but they're going to start practicing, can I turn it in on time responsibly? Can I understand when and where to stop using it when needed because there are other activities that are important before we even turn on a data plan, way before we ever turn on social media?
I love this process that you described too as part of that sort of pathway that you're describing where you have the kid pitch if they want a new app because, I'm sure parents, teachers are always getting this like, hey, well, there's this really fun game. All my friends are playing it. Can I put it on my phone? And you actually recommend having the kid make a pitch. Yeah. What does it entail?
They come and they say, here's this app I want. One of the things I'm always going to want to know is, how does the app make money? Does it make money because we pay for it up front? Does it make money because there's a subscription? Does it make money because it's going to be bombarding me with ads? Right? Who else is using it? Are there other people that I'm interacting with or just with a computer? What is the value of the app? Does it help me be more creative? Does it help me learn something new? Does it help me stay in touch with somebody? Does it just entertain me to pass some time? And that should be in your device agreement. We are agreeing ahead of time what types of technology we want to use. You're just coming and showing me how this app aligns or doesn't align with the agreement. And sometimes the answer is, we can't really tell. Let's do a trial run. Let's do a test for a couple days, and then we'll come back and we'll reevaluate it. And the brilliance of this is that is the exact process we want kids to do for themselves down the road. All the questions they used to be asking, pitching to a parent, they're now asking for themselves because they've built that habit.
What are the conversations around safety on these devices when you're still trying to frame it in positive terms?
Yeah. It's a great question. One of the things is to talk about what are the conditions that keep you safe. One of the things that I did in writing the book, which was really hard, one of the hardest things I've done, is I looked through every case that I could find where there'd been some sort of online abuse, some sort of, somebody had convinced or tricked a kid into participating in some sort of activity or conversation that was illegal or certainly unsavory. And what was really surprising to me is that a few simple things would take more than 90%, maybe even more than that, of those cases just off of the possibility spectrum, right? Here's one. Never use a device behind a closed door. Just don't do it. Just that alone just takes out a huge amount of risk. And I would say a second one is make sure that the devices are never in kids' room at night. They should not be sleeping with their device. And that's something that you can pitch as a positive way. You don't have to say any don'ts. You just say, at night, our devices sleep over here, right? Yeah. In our case, it's a table in our room, but sort of away from our bed, and that's where they all sleep. We have a monopoly on the chargers. If you want to charge your phone, you charge it in our room over here.
And all of these habits around safety and balance, says Collada, actually set the stage for technology to be a force for good in your family.
One of the things I think is really important is helping kids see and practice how using their devices can strengthen their family relationships. And, I'll give you an example of this. Part of the agreement with our kids when they have their devices is that they are supposed to curate family memories. So when we go on a trip, they are expected to be capturing fun things that are happening. That's one example. Another one that we do is we have a shared notepad app on all of our kids' devices. And anytime somebody in our family just says something really goofy or funny or whatever, they just write it down. And then at the end of the year, we go through and we review all of the funniest things that people have said, and we actually turn those quotes into our Christmas card, right? That idea of giving kids an assignment, an expectation that they are using their device to help strengthen their family is a really powerful lesson to be teaching them, and one that helps them, again, just be prepared to use these devices in really positive ways.
This has been great. Thanks for giving us so much to think about today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Richard Collada is the CEO of the International Society for Technology and Education and ASCD. He's also author of the book Digital for Good: Raising Kids to Thrive in an Online World. I really loved all of the practical advice we got from Collada. And I know we got pretty family-centric there, but the same concepts do seem to apply across the board in schools, at work. I'm actually thinking about my own phone use differently now. What's on your mind? Did anything you heard today surprise or challenge you? Let's talk about it. Send an email to topofmind@byu.edu. Top of Mind is a BYU radio podcast. Today's episode was produced by Isabella Sosa and Vanessa Goodman with help from Abby Karras, James Hoops, Samuel Benson, Sam Payne, and me. Our audio engineer is Lauren Sandberg. I'm Julie Rose. We'll talk soon.